Hey guys, yeah, this is episode 20 of the Rugby Recap. You have myself as well as the Kiwi lads. First of all, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, mate. 16 games to go in this Rugby World Cup competition. We've got 8 next week for the final round of the group stages. Only 2 sides confirmed in the Rugby World Cup quarterfinals at this point, being Wales and England. Still a few curveballs, perhaps just around the corner. Should be very entertaining.
Yeah, no, couldn't agree more of you. And before we get into this review here, guys, make sure to like and subscribe towards this channel, and definitely leave comments below. Let us know what you thought of the games that happened within this round. But besides that, let's get straight into this. So, with the first one, we're going to talk about Uruguay versus Namibia. The results ended 36 points to 26 in favor of the Uruguayans. A pretty, I'm not going to say convincing victory, because it was actually pretty close, actually, throughout the whole game in most stages. Again, the Namibians actually surprised a lot of people getting that very early try. I believe it's like an intercept, if I'm not mistaken, like in the first minute, really. And then from there, they kind of built onto that, scoring another try. But of course, Uruguay kind of came back into it and got a few tries of their own. So overall, what did you kind of think about that game? Because it was really end to end. So what's your take on it?
I think it was the perfect opportunity for Namibia to get their first victory in this Rugby World Cup and their first ever in a Rugby World Cup competition. Yeah. The problem in that second half was evident, and that was the discipline of the Namibians. Unfortunately, they were right in the contest, and it was their big chance. And then yellow card. I think there was a red thrown in there as well. And then the Uruguayans, they took those opportunities to be able to score points. I believe when one of the players was off, I think Uruguay scored twice or 3 times, and then that really helped cement themselves as the victors in that game. But overall, that's the thing. These two sides, no one was really expecting them to be able to compete with the top sides in Pool A, yet we still saw moments. Uruguay, I think, have had what I would call a successful tournament. They pushed France in their game up against them, up against the Italians. They did look relatively strong as well. We've got to remember, France actually didn't receive a bonus point in their game up against Uruguay. And because of that, now between France and Italy this weekend, that's a knockout game. Whoever loses that could end up going home, depending on what happens with Uruguay versus New Zealand, which I think could be a very intriguing game. But also Namibia, they've had their fair share of good moments throughout this Rugby World Cup, losing a few players due to either injury or also those cards with their captain Dazel. But yeah, overall very entertaining game. Start off the weekend. Well, it was a Thursday, so early weekend start.
Exactly. But yeah, again, Uruguay were just pretty impressive overall. So you want to give them props in that sense. And again, like you said, it's weird to think, but this group isn't really over entirely just because of that kind of how the point system works now. Because again, it will kind of come down towards that final round. With New Zealand obviously facing the likes of Uruguay and France going the likes, I believe, of Italy. And like you said, that will kind of determine who gets first and second. But anyway, we're moving then towards the next game. And this is one of the bigger games, you could say, definitely of this round, really, which was Japan versus Samoa. And the Japanese were victorious in this sense. They won 28 points to 26, if I'm not mistaken, or 22, I mean. And it was really just... like when I said the last one was end to end, this one was really end to end in terms of how the game went. And it's one of those where the Samoans actually, they actually, again, the Japanese were definitely favored. Let's just say that they were definitely the favorite going into this. And it's not really any stretch of the imagination to say that, but they're definitely the favorite going into this. But the Samoans, they really just held their own. And throughout the game, there was points within it where they kind of came back into it, scored a few tries. And again, both sides played pretty good. But at the end of the day, I thought there was one man who just stood out throughout the whole game, and that was Michael Lynch. I just thought he was incredible throughout the whole game. He scored, I think, 2 tries, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, he turned several balls within the breakdown, and I just thought he was incredible overall. So yeah, I was really impressed by him. But just in terms of the whole game itself, what did you pick out from it?
I think Samoa took a bit of a gamble with their starting lineup. They went with a couple of players who weren't in the best form. Ben Lamb, for instance, he was a player who struggled in that last contest, only touching the ball about once or twice, did drop one of those 2 times. In this game, it wasn't really any better. Also got himself red carded near the end of the game. Duncan Paiua, I thought he played a lot better when he moved into the centres later in the contest, but I believe that the starting lineup should have involved Danny Tuala starting at fullback rather than Duncan Paiua. Also maybe a little bit of a change out on that left wing with Nigel Awong or Ed Fidel starting there. I think Samoa were hoping that those players who went badly were just going to be able to magically fix what went wrong for them the week prior, but just with this quick turnaround in the Rugby World Cup, it makes it very tricky to do. Fun fact, I think they actually came in as slight favourites, Samoa on the New Zealand betting odds,
Really?
which was interesting. But yeah, both of those sides, they had a good chance of being able to win it. Japan, they were clinical at times. I think that they still haven't quite found their peak in this Rugby World Cup, and they will have to find it when they go head-to-head with Argentina next week, because once again, that is a playoff game. Whoever wins that goes through, and they will be taking on the Welsh. And to be honest, depending on how this to be honest, I feel like Japan and Argentina on their given day can challenge that Welsh side in that quarterfinal. So I'm looking forward to seeing who it will be. At the moment, who is your mind telling you? Do you think Los Pumas are going through, or do you think Japan are going to continue this winning run? We've got to remember there are talks about Eddie Jones trying to go to Japan. I said it earlier on. They're playing this well. They're not going to need him.
Exactly. And look, we'll probably cover a lot more of this in terms of the preview when we're going over the next round, of course. But at this current point of time, I'm probably hedging my bet towards the Pumas to get the win over the Japanese. I could be wrong, of course. My mind may change going into the preview, which we'll film later on this week. But again, it's one of those where I don't know. I feel pretty confident that the Pumas, going off, I guess, the amount of tier one, I guess, games they've played recently, in terms of playing the Rugby Championship and playing, several sides, the July Internationals as well as the Autumn Internationals. I just feel like the games they've shown me in those period of time, I just think that they've been more impressive compared to the Japanese, because the Japanese going into this World Cup just weren't really impressive at all. They were kind of in a losing streak, to be perfectly honest. And again, when it came to the World Cup, of course, they've kind of picked up a bit of form again. So that's really the reason why I think they're kind of seeing this will be a good battle. But I would probably hedge my bet towards the Pumas in getting that win. But what about yourself? Because again, we'll cover a lot more of this in the preview, guys. Just want to know right now, who do you think would win that battle?
I feel like Argentina at moments throughout that Chile game, my brain was saying, well, Japan have got a really good shot here, because at the moment when they get it right, like their forwards are doing their job in the breakdowns, and then that is one of the keys, of course. And then if that backline is firing, like we don't really get to see a whole heap of Nakamura in that midfield at 13, whether or not that's just a little bit of, in fact, he's been playing 12, Dylan Riley on his outside.
I was going to say.
At 13. Matsushima, he's another player that we haven't really seen a huge amount of, but Lamani Lameki, he stepped up big time at number 15 for the Japanese throughout that game. So, yeah, I think it could be closer than a lot of people would have said at the start of this Rugby World Cup, in which I think a lot of people would have said Argentina by 20 or so. Now, maybe we're getting closer to that, changing by 10 or 5 between the two teams. Yeah, it should be a very entertaining one when they go head-to-head next week, and one of the many important games of the last round in the Rugby World Cup.
Exactly. But of course, going to the next one, probably the biggest scoreline we definitely had throughout the weekend, definitely being the All Blacks Italy game, being 96 points to 17. I don't think anyone saw this coming in terms of the margin. Let's just make that clear. In terms of the margin, I don't think anyone saw that coming. I mean, a lot of people going into this actually thought the Italians actually could have a chance in making the game closer, even get a surprise win. That's what a lot of people were saying. Again, I wasn't really thinking the Italians would win the game, but I was thinking they could, maybe hold their own and kind of make get a few tries in there, stop them, stop the All Blacks in their tracks throughout the game. But again, just the All Blacks they wiped the floor. They literally wiped the floor against the Italians, and they just had no response. It was like after they scored 20 points, they were just like defeated already, and they just continued to just pounce and get a lot more tries on the board. So, I mean, just what was your take overall? Because I was just mind blown for what I saw throughout the game.
See, I was the same, because I said the All Blacks would win it by about that 20 margin. I didn't think it was going to be a hugely close game. It wasn't going to be a huge runaway either. But yeah, not many people were predicting to be close to about 100 points for the ABs in this game. And I don't know how much of that is down to how well the All Blacks played or how badly Italy played. I think there's a little bit of both that needs to be considered in that theory, but yeah, New Zealand, their backline actually, was functioning well. They were working together as one. I think the key that's changed it around is Geordie Barrett. And number 12, we've got to remember.
He was very impressive. Yeah.
Someone who wasn't, though, your boy on the outside, Rico. What was he up to throughout that game?
This is the thing. It's weird, like how, like, I maybe I'm wrong in saying this, by the way, but I can't remember the last time I've seen both All Black centers have a good game the same time. Is that maybe a bold?
That's probably
a bold thing to say, but like it's one of those where I can't think of the last game where both of them were both pairings, at least. It doesn't have to be Geordie and Reiko, by the way, but just both centers were on it. Because I do agree with you. I mean, Geordie was outstanding. I mean, I think he was probably the man of the match, I'd say. I'm not sure actually who they gave the man of the match to in this game. It could have been Geordie, I'm not sure. Might have been Artis Sevilla, because I thought he was very impressive as well. But again, Geordie Barrett was definitely up there in terms of the best players in the game. But yeah, Reiko he just wasn't in it. Again, I'm not even sure. Did he ever try to his name? Because again, there were a lot of tries, so I've maybe forgotten if
I don't think he, or not. Oh no, he might have. He might have got one in the end.
I can't remember. There was just too many. It's too many that happened.
Big list.
Exactly. But to be fair, I was laughing throughout the whole game because I mean, as soon as I saw Mark Talia playing, the thing is, I was laughing with my dad just because I was like, whenever Mark had the ball, I was like, just give Mark the ball. He'll just score a try for you. Like it was just simple. Like it was just a match made in heaven for him, just to run around players and just score a ton of tries. That's kind of what I was hoping for. Again, my fantasy, I also had my fantasy, so I do have to admit I was kind of cheering for him a bit more.
What was helping it. By the way, Rico did not score in this game.
There you go.
Got very close, but
yeah. But I mean, other than that, I mean, I didn't mention him already, but Artis Sevilla, I thought had another. He was very impressive in this game. Like, what did you think about him?
Yeah, he looks like he's definitely. Well, he already had that number 8 jersey unlocked, didn't he? But it's going to be intriguing to see what the All Blacks do loose forward trio-wise, because I feel like Dalton Papali'i, he did decently throughout this game. Sam Cane, there's still a few question marks around him because I know he dropped the ball, but like he's just back from an injury, so we can allow that. The game up against the Italians. Next week's game up against Uruguay is going to be intriguing for the ABs because I believe they still have to go with a relatively strong side and can't afford to give too many players a rest for heading into that big game of the quarterfinals up against the Irish. Aaron Smith, I think that he had a lot on his mind in this game, including the fact that he wants that starting lineup spot. He heard people talking about Roygaard last week or the week prior getting those 2 tries, and Aaron went, I'll get a hat trick. I'm still the man who's going to be starting. Roygaard can be off the bench, and he had a great impact coming off the bench, Cam Roygaard, alongside Damian McKenzie. Who would have thought having McKenzie off the bench when Mo'unga's in the starting lineup would lead to it going well?
Not us.
Everyone.
Not us. Did we say that? I think so.
No, not at all. Not at all.
No.
It seemed like the selection, even though at the time when the squad was announced, it didn't seem like the right decision in some regards for certain players. It still actually worked very well up against the Italians. But once again, is that down to how badly the Italians played? I think something that really hurt Italy was their game the week prior up against Uruguay because they changed all their players around in positions. They went with Tommaso Allen rather than 15 that he was playing in this game. He played 10. Garbisi rather than 10, he played 12. Capuzio rather than 14, he played 15. And you could tell defensively that they didn't actually know where they were supposed to be. And up against a side like the All Blacks, when they were firing the way that they were with their running rugby, they just didn't have time to be able to adjust. But I think this is probably one of the quickest flowing games in terms of running rugby that we have seen throughout this Rugby World Cup. And now that the All Blacks have been able to put that 96 points on, I don't think teams are going to allow them to play that same style of rugby. I think you're going to make it gritty and grindy in the breakdowns to try and slow them down and not allow that momentum to flow, because that's what the All Blacks want. They want to be able to get into the breakdown, get that ball moving and catch you defensively slipping. But yeah, up against other opposition, the likes of the quarterfinal, if they are head-to-head with the Irish, I can see Ireland making it a scrap, and it's going to be a pretty epic game when the two sides go head-to-head.
It'll be really good, actually, to see what happens. Again, Ireland's going to have to look back at this game. I think this is the game I think they're going to look back at the most, actually, when I think about all the games. I mean, again, I'll look at all the footage, of course, but I think this is the one they're going to be about, okay, this is what the All Blacks are going to most likely plan to go with going into the quarterfinal in terms of their mindset. But I do also have to point out, I thought the set pieces actually in this game were pretty impressive. And again, that does come down towards Alpha and Nepo being in terms of that, the scrummage. I thought they were very impressive. But again, I'm not saying they weren't impressive, but again, you also have to remember that the Italian scrum is the weight difference is it's actually there's a huge disparity between the two. Actually, I thought it would be much closer in terms of the pack weight. Just there's a huge disparity between the two. So maybe that's what came into the favor of the All Blacks. But at the same time, I just thought overall in the set pieces they were pretty good throughout this game. So that's definitely I guess a tick. That they can obviously check off in that sense. But anyway, moving away from this game now, we'll then go on to the Argentina versus Chile game, which is where the Pumas, again, another kind of just brilliant performance overall, winning against the Chileans 59-3, which is pretty impressive, I'd say. Again, we got to see a few of the old dogs kind of battle on this one. Particularly, I was very happy to see Augustin Krebi also get a try for himself, and as soon as he came up, he's like, yeah, and everyone's like, yeah, come on. So I was pretty happy about that one. But what do you think about this game? Because again, like we said beforehand, this was I think it was the first ever South American match we've ever seen in the Rugby World Cup. So what was your take on this one?
Nicolas Sanchez also doing very well at number
brilliant.
10 for the Argentines. I think that he's almost helped secure that starting lineup now position. But
I was going to ask you this, by the way. Yeah,
it was overall just a good advocate for South American rugby, I would say, for the future of this Rugby World Cup. Because don't get me wrong, like Chile, yes, they conceded a lot of points. I think that they were really tired throughout that second half as well, which did hurt them a bit. But then there were times in that game when they were competitive and they were really pushing the Argentines. It was only really that first 20 or so minutes when they were caught slightly off guard, and then the last maybe 20 or 25 minutes when they were conceding back to back to back. There was a patch in the middle where I think they went about 20 minutes or so without conceding a try, which was pretty impressive for them. But Argentina, the still slight concern I have is I don't know if they've reached their peak yet in this Rugby World Cup. And it's only a concern because if they make it through this next stage up against Japan, I feel like they're going to be slowly going up and up as they get towards those quarterfinals, and I think they could be a real threat for a lot of sides in this Rugby World Cup. Michael Cheika, he said that he was thoroughly impressed with what they were able to do, and he said there were still things they need to work on as they move forward in this World Cup competition. But overall, a solid enough performance. The trend of this round seemed to be the games were either close or they were way lopsided.
Exactly.
And that trend kind of continued for this game. The only one that kind of broke that trend, I would argue, is probably Australia-Portugal, seeing as it was split by 20 points, which is still a relatively one-sided game, but it's still slightly competitive.
Yeah, it's less than what you expected. Yeah, exactly. But I do want to ask you the question. You kind of alluded to it already, but going off this game, Nicolas Sanchez, he definitely was the playmaker, to say the least. And I do think that's an ability where I hate to say this because I really do like Santiago Caceres a lot, guys. I actually like him really. Like, there's a lot of young 10s that I would look out for. Like, if I was making a team, for example, he'd be definitely in my top 3 in that sense. But I don't know, just at this point in time, I think Sanchez still has the better playmaking ability compared to Caceres. And I think maybe that's that's maybe a reason why you go with him ahead of Caceres in this one. But I don't know. It's a really tight call, by the way, guys, because again, with Nicolas Sanchez as well, he offers you that kicking aspect as well, which Caceres really doesn't kind of offer you. But again, when you have someone like Buffelli, it's not really a huge difference, but it's a tight call. So I just want to know what you think on that aspect. If the Pumas were to switch it up, because again, if I'm not mistaken, is this their last game that they've played now? In terms of the they still have to play Japan, of course. They still have to play Japan. Oh my gosh, I just remembered. In my head, I was thinking, they actually just go straight into, their quarterfinal game, but they still have to decide. There's going to be the decider between the Japanese. So, in that case, I'm going to reword the question right here. Who do you think starts against Japan in terms of that 10 spot?
Nicolas Sanchez. Easy. And the reason I say that is Santiago Carreras, don't get me wrong, he's been brilliant throughout the Rugby Championship and everything along those lines, but we saw the perfect example of a side in Australia when it came to, I guess, the same sort of argument could be said between Carter Gordon and Quade Cooper to a certain extent. Do you go with the old dog who knows all the tricks in the book, or do you go with the young pup who's trying to make his name in this Rugby World Cup? And you'd have to go with the old dog for this matchup, because just the ability of Nicolas Sanchez, like Carreras is an X-factor player when he comes off the bench, and I believe that actually helped them score some later tries in that contest, but they do need that experience and that cool, calm head at number 10. I think that Thomas Kubeli, him at number 9, would be a very good option for them as well. I think that Gonzalo Berrano, also off the bench, could be a viable option in the game up against the Japanese.
I would still have him to start. I think he's
I think that he partners nicely with Carreras, though, so I feel like you want to have those two gelling together still, rather than mixing it up just before the playoff games. That's my only reasoning behind it. But I think it comes down as well to Emiliano Boffelli. If he's in the starting lineup, they may decide that they don't need Sanchez out there till the second half when he takes over the kicking tee.
Yeah, that's what I think as well.
Yeah, I would go with Sanchez just because he's shown that he is in form, and to take an informed player out of the starting lineup at this stage of the competition in a must-win game could be extremely risky.
Interesting. Do you think that maybe then they could switch? I don't actually disagree with you that maybe Sanchez could be the better choice against the Japanese, because again, you also have to remember that when you're going against the likes of the Japanese, I can see it being kind of a penalty game in terms of who gets the most penalties and who converts them. And I can't. You'll probably. I can't remember his name right now. But the Japanese number 10. What's his name quickly?
It would be Ryuto Matsuda, I believe.
Matsuda. Is that what it? I can quickly look at this if you want right now.
No, his first name's not Ryuto, though. I don't believe.
I know Matsuda sounds right.
Matsuda.
Let me quickly score.
What's his name? Rikia Matsuda.
There you go. Yeah, I just saw it. Yeah, Rikia Matsuda. He's been very impressive. I like his form, actually, when he goes for the penalties. But, I think he's still 100%, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of his kicks. I could be wrong with that, but I think he's one of the only players still with 100%.
There's a few guys at the moment who are sitting on about 15 from 15, and I think Tommaso Allen is one of those guys for the Italians.
Is he still? Is he? I know. Did he convert everything in that All Blacks game?
I believe so. I think he converted everything that he was offered.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, so I do think that battle between him and Sanchez and Boffelli, that's what's really going to dictate the game, I think. So we'll see what happens on that front, of course. But we'll talk a lot more about this, obviously, in the preview. But anyway, moving on then towards the next game. There's a lot of games that happen, but the one that we're talking about right now is actually Fiji versus Georgia, and this is pretty close actually in terms of the scoreline. Not what we expected really, but again, what the Georgians have shown throughout this Rugby World Cup, you really just can't underestimate them. And the scoreline did finish 17 points to 12 in the Fijians' favor. But just what was your take on this game overall? Because I thought it was a pretty impressive scoreline from a Georgian perspective.
It was a very confusing game, I think is the best way of describing it. Because the Fijians, they made one change compared to what they had in their game up against the Wallabies, that being Celestino Ravatamanda into the starting lineup rather than Gita Wainignolo. And you wouldn't have thought it was one player difference. You would have thought they changed the whole team with the way that they were playing, the handling errors. They were hurting Fiji heavily in the breakdowns rather than winning those penalties. They were getting penalised for being off their feet, etc. Like Lavani Botia, as much as he was trying to get those turnovers at times, just wasn't quite able to get it right. But the Fijians, in a game that honestly looked like they almost threw it away, they dug deep. They knew that they had to get at least a victory here just to really help cement themselves in Pool C. And they were able to do just that. Now, the thing is, with that bonus point going the way of the Wallabies, which we will be talking about in a short moment, it of course now means that this game up against Portugal, the Fijians either need to win it or they do need to lose it by less than 7 or receive that bonus point for scoring 4 or more tries. Here's a fun one for you, Tim. The only game the Fijians have scored 4 or more tries in is the game that they lost.
Exactly. I'll be honest. I actually don't think the thing is that they're playing against the likes of the Portuguese, and we're going to talk this. We keep saying this. We're going to talk a lot more about this in the preview. But it's one of those where I don't know. The Portuguese, I still think, can kind of reduce that scoreline a bit, like similar to what we saw against the Welsh. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. But I wouldn't disagree with you that they maybe don't score more than 4. We'll see what happens. But again, in this game, I mean, I just found it very impressive that Fiji only scored a try when it came towards the 51st minute. I felt like that was pretty impressive. Like for the Georgians to hold that long for like a try to come from, I just thought, I was like, wow, this is pretty. That's a good performance from their side. But of course, like you said, this is actually, it's good for Fiji, of course, to win this game. That's really just what they needed to do. But yeah, it does open the gap a bit now. Like you said, with the Wallabies, now it comes down towards that last round. But it's definitely in their favor. Let's just say that it's definitely in their favor in terms of what they need to do. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens.
Unless we see a repeat of what happened in 2019 in the game up against Uruguay, the Fijians should be completely fine. Now, the interesting thing about it is they have to now decide whether or not they're making a lot of changes in their starting lineup, or whether they are going once again with a similar side. I will say straight away, lineouts in this game. Sam Matavesi, he was actually one of the only players in my lineup prediction for Fiji that I changed, because I felt like lineouts in their last game up against the Australians wasn't quite what it needed to be.
No,
Tavita Ikanaviri, he offered that stability when he came off the bench, and compared to that game up against the Australians, I felt in the Aussie game it was actually the starting lineup that really stepped up, whereas in this game it was the guys off the bench. The likes of Tui Sui, Ikanaviri also, in the back line, Lamani, Vinaya Habosi, being able to score himself that try in the 68th minute of the game as well, with 4 defenders all trying to get to him. He just kept breaking through, manages to score it, but it's gonna be intriguing. It's gonna be one of those ones where you're on the edge of your seat going, come on, are you gonna be able to do it, Fiji? Or is this going to be one of those moments that are so close yet so far away? Because with what they've been through in this World Cup, you do want to see them make it that little bit further.
Exactly.
And I feel like they are at the moment almost the people's champ, if that makes sense. Like everyone, ever since that first game up against the Welsh, everyone's wanted to see them go far. And the fact that they're going to be playing England, which is a repeat of the game
like
that took place a little while ago.
Fiji.
yeah, poor England, eh? Although at the moment, they're on a bit of a winning streak. One of the 4 sides in this World Cup who haven't lost a game. So England will still feel confident going into that next fixture, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, that'll be...
Although they have to face Samoa first, so they'll give them a bit of a rough up before they get into those quarterfinals. The Pacific Islanders, they normally have each other's backs. Unless they're going head-to-head, then they're just straight into each other.
Gosh. But, no, again, it's going to be really fascinating to see just what happens on that front. But, look, we'll move on towards the next game, which is Scotland versus Romania. Again, a pretty convincing victory here. The Scottish just wiped the floor against the Romanians. 84 points doesn't like the nil, really. It was just one of those games where, the Scottish just tore them apart, particularly Darcy Graham. I thought it was very impressive throughout this game. He was definitely my man of the match 100% because he just had the ball was just glued to his hand really most of the time, and he just kept scoring tries. So he was pretty impressive throughout the game. But again, this is exactly what Scotland needed to do. This is exactly what they needed to do. Get the bonus points, however much it needed in terms of that score, in terms of the points. But again, this is another group that's come down towards that final round. Again, the South Africans now don't have to play a game, but it will now come down towards the Irish, Ireland-Scotland game. And to what I saw, I could be wrong on this because I saw this from Twitter, but someone said that what the Scottish need to do is get 21 points and make sure the Scottish don't aren't in that difference. If that makes sense. Like they're not close. And if they're able to do that, then that's what will allow them to progress through. But it's a pretty, tough thing to say, obviously, going into the world number 1. But, again, what do you think about this game? Because, again, it was really just more of a thrashing, really. Just that's kind of the best word I can think of. But what did you think about it?
Yeah, I think Scotland did, like you said, what they needed to. They had quite a few new players in that starting lineup, players who were fighting for a spot and an opportunity in this next game up against the Irish. Darcy Graham, I did predict before the game it would either be him or Kyle Stone who got a hat-trick. He won up me, got himself the 4. But I think with Scotland, there were clinical moments. There was also, for me, the concern at the moment for Scotland was probably Ollie Smith at 15. It seemed like he was trying to score all the tries himself rather than setting them up. And like one of the commentators said, when he scored, well, he had to score that one because he had about 4 men on his outside that could have easily run it over when he was tackled about 5 metres out from the line. But I think that was the type of game for Scotland that they wanted for their confidence and they slightly need it because they've had a couple tough games. We've got to remember that even up against the Tongans at times, like Tonga, of course, we'll get to that in a short moment. They are no easy beat at the moment. Yes, they may concede quite a few points, but they score quite a few as well for this Tongan side. So, yeah, Scotland, they'll like that game in terms of a confidence builder for a few of those players who will be in the starting lineup and reserves up against the Irish. This next game, I mean, the easiest way for Scotland to get through to the next stage in this competition is if they win up against the Irish by 8, they knock them out of this World Cup, which would be absolutely massive because, like, that's where head-to-head results, I guess, are so important, and also where the bonus points are so important. We've mentioned about it throughout this World Cup. France versus Italy. France have won 3 games. The Italians, if they manage to get themselves that victory, that will take them up to 3, but it's those bonus points that they've received in the other contests that are going to be that difference maker. So, yeah, I think we're going to see a full-strength Irish side. I think we're also going to see a full-strength Scottish team. It's going to be a Six Nations rematch that will be must-see.
Yeah. No, the thing is that even the Irish, they've pretty much gone with a full-strength squad anyway throughout most of their games anyway. So I really don't expect them to change that at all. But again, maybe then towards the Wallabies versus Portugal game. The game finished 34 points to 14 in favor of the Wallabies. It's the game they really just needed they just needed it really at the end of the day to seal off, I guess, their tournament. It's going to be essentially their last game, of course, in what it was in this Rugby World Cup. Put it on a high, I guess, just in terms of just that devastating defeat, obviously, the week before. But again, they got what they needed to do, scored 5 tries in the process as well. There's not really much I can say from this game because it's one of those where, again, Wallabies weren't playing actually, they're not playing, obviously, what they see as their best team. And again, I believe Karevi had to come in for Connor Gordon at the last second as well. So there's even some switches just before the game happened. But again, the Portuguese, they still held their own, scored 2 tries. They made a name for themselves in that sense. And just again, they'll obviously play next week, I believe, against who are they playing? They're against the Fijians, if I'm not mistaken, in that game. So that'll be kind of it's not Fiji.
Oh yes, sorry, yeah.
It is Fiji,
the wrong way around.
Yeah.
You can do that again. I was half asleep.
No worries. So I do believe, the Portuguese, of course, will be facing the Fijians. So that'll be a good game to finish off their kind of tournament. But again, what did you think of this game overall?
Well, you mentioned about how it's not the strongest Wallabies side, and I have to ask you, would you say it was the strongest team up against the Fijians when they were beaten, or the strongest team up against the Welsh when they were beaten? Or would it be those boys who are back in Australia, like the likes of Quade Cooper, maybe a little bit of Michael Hooper as well?
Obviously, there's the whole argument around that. Yeah, like they didn't select Cooper. They didn't have. I mean, but there's those whole things around. Like, I'll be honest. There's only really 2. I'm trying to think. Is there more players? We can talk about. We could probably do a whole segment, by the way, about the Wallabies in the future. By the way, there's only a few players I would say that I was surprised they didn't select overall going into the World Cup. Again, I'd definitely say Michael Hooper is one of them for sure. He's like the standout option in that sense. I understood the reasons behind not selecting Quade Cooper or maybe Bernard Foley, but I would have gone with one of them at least. I think one of them should have been included. Again, that's up for the decision because even I'm a bit split in terms of who you go for in between those two. Because I think a lot of people would just say, "Oh, you got to go for Quade Cooper," but actually, I think Bernard Foley was pretty impressive. I think for the Wallabies when he actually played a lot. So I don't know. I would actually go with him maybe if I was thinking about it like a lot deeper, but. Again, I mean, there's also Pete Samu. I thought he's been very impressive for the Wallabies as well. So it's just there's a lot of names you've missed out, but it's just one of those where when you look back at the teams they put out as well, there's been a lot of players injured even on that front. Going against the likes of the Welsh, they didn't have Will Skelton, they didn't have Tinanel Tupou. So I'm not saying these are excuses all the way, guys, but it's just one of those things like where you have to keep this in mind when you look back at do they have their best team available in terms of every single fixture. And I think Fiji, they had both Tinanel Tupou and Will Skelton in that one, if I'm not mistaken. So I think if I were to say out of all the games they've played in, that's the one I can kind of look back at and be like, okay, that's the game they should have won. And I think a lot of Wallabies fans can even tell you that. That's the one they should have won. But again, it's one of those tournaments where, oh gosh, we're going to have to do like a deep dive in terms of what the Wallabies can do, and we may actually do it in the future. By the way, guys, maybe on this channel, we maybe give you guys maybe a deep dive of just what we think about the future of each of the, I guess, the big squads overall, as well as the tier 2 nations, because we obviously want to include everyone in that sense. But
well, of course, Portugal, one of the sides that I think have stood up throughout this Rugby World Cup, impressing a lot of people. They talk about the fact that they're trying to inspire that next generation of rugby players, and I feel like they've done just that from the way that they've, I guess, not just held themselves on the field, but also held themselves off the field as well. Very respectful side, the Portuguese, it would seem, and just, very humble team that are happy to be there, getting to take part in this Rugby World Cup. Appleton, the captain, once again, he was just saying, this is great to be here, we just want to be able to play rugby and play all these top sides. Exactly what they wanted to do.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. But again, we're moving on towards the final game, which was South Africa versus Tonga. The game did finish off 49 points to 18. So, again, I'm not going to say it's a convincing scoreline because, again, Tonga were in it. They were actually in it in points in this game, which is credit to them. Is pretty impressive. But again, the South Africans obviously have a lot of depth coming off the bench, and that's really what helped them to kind of build that scoreline deeper into the game. But I mean, as most of you guys know, I saw that game live, and I just thought I thought both sides were impressive, and I really do mean that, both sides. I want to make that clear. Both sides were impressive. Again, the South Africans in that first half, I just thought, they scored. I mean, that Kobusranek try was a pretty easy try to score, just a quick tap and good intuition from him just to kind of sneak around the corner and score that. And then what was that? That Kaden Moody, I believe, try was a bit, just it went all over the place, but he was fortunate obviously to get the ball and score underneath the post. So happy for him in that sense. But I guess when it came more into the later stages of that first half, that's when the Tongans they kind of showed a bit of their ability, and they got that try. I can't remember who scored the try, but it was good. It was well worked actually. They had a lot of kind of phases in that sense, and they literally continued that straight into the second half of the way. Like there was one moment where Ben Timofema, like he just off the lineouts, he came around into the blind side, and he just busted like a South African player, just went away, and I was laughing when I saw that. But he's awesome, by the way. I think he had the biggest applause actually in the stadium when he came off the field. Like a lot of, myself included, everyone was just standing up and just because everyone knows how he's kind of like seen as like an icon, you could say, in the game, and just he's just kind of he's the captain as well, so you got to give him his applause. But just from your perspective, watching it in terms of your live stream, like what do you think about the game overall?
Yeah, I think Ben Tamefuna, definitely one of the standout players for the Tongans. South Africa, they had a few players stepped up, Dion Fourie being one of them. I feel like he did very well at hooker, getting thrown into the starting lineup for the first time throughout this Rugby World Cup, walking away with a try and the player of the match. Andre Pollard at 10, safe as houses, some would say. But then Marnie Libok comes off the bench, gets 100% of his kicks as well. Says, I'm still here, don't worry. Boys, I'm still about.
Yeah,
just in case.
Up on the way. Yeah,
makes it very tricky, doesn't it, in terms of that fly half battle as we head towards those playoff games. And I think the slightly unfortunate thing for the Springboks is now they've played all their games. They don't have that one next week to be able to test it. And it's going to be very intriguing to see which way they do go. But overall, South Africa, they did what they needed to in this game. And I mentioned about it during the live stream. I feel like this was a lot more beneficial for them than, let's say, an 80-0 or a 90-0 victory over the Tongans. Conceding the 3 tries, the most that they have throughout this Rugby World Cup. And I feel like there's still a lot to be learnt for the Springboks. And that sounds weird to say for the World Champs, but it's normally the ones that are continuing to learn that are the ones that will keep on getting better and better. And if the Boks do learn from those mistakes, they're going to be an extremely hard side to stop throughout this Rugby World Cup competition, and even harder than they already are, because they are a determined beast at the moment. They've got some big decisions to make in terms of players. Dwayne Vermeulen and Jasper Wiese are both on the starting side. I don't think they'll be doing that again. So now it's more of that question of who's going to be that guy who says, you know what, I'll take that 8 jersey in the next game. But then they've also got Kwaka Smith, who's playing well at the moment off the bench. So they almost are getting forced into a 6-2 split. But then you can't also afford to have Marnie Libok off the bench, I don't believe. If you're going with that 6-2, instead you probably should go with de Klerk because he's got that 9 and 10 cover, but then you need an outside back.
It's tough.
It's a hard one for the Boks.
It's a tough choice
at the moment. They need 24 options rather than 23, and they'll be fine.
I mean, they could. I'm not saying this is what they do, but I guess what's it called? Being a devil's advocate here, they could also go with Grant Williams as a 9, and also you can cover wing, and then you have Manny Libok off the bench. So that's maybe how they could do the 6-2 split if they wanted to.
Maybe
that's the best way of doing it. But and then obviously you have Flafu that starts or Kopisarnik, whatever you want in that sense. But it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of debate in terms of, I guess, the box now in terms of who they go with in that quarterfinal. Because again, like we said, it's not official, but it's most likely going to be the French, obviously, in that quarterfinal. And first of all, I just want to say, very pleased to see that Dupont will be available. We've seen a lot of photos now that he's back in training and all that. So it does seem that he'll be match fit, to say the least, going into that game. But it's one of those where, there's a bit of a...
It's an interesting one, isn't it? You have to ask the question, if this wasn't Dupont with the injured face, would World Rugby say you're not playing? And the tricky part that they've got, like we were looking it up all throughout the week as well, if he gets any severe worse damage, who's to blame? Is it the French medics for allowing him to play with the broken face? Or is it World Rugby's responsibility to say you shouldn't be playing? Player safety, we're trying to cut down on injuries. We're trying to limit head contact. If Dupont takes a good knock to the side of his face, I know this sounds drastic, but we looked it up. He could lose like half his feeling in his face for the rest of his life. Who pays that lawsuit? Does World Rugby or does French Rugby have to pay for that one? It seems like if it wasn't Dupont, they wouldn't even be questioning this as an opportunity for another player. They'd say, you're injured, go home, rest. But because it's Dupont, they're saying we've got to try and get some way of keeping this man in the game, even if it means risking his safety.
But I also think it's him, by the way, as well. That's what you also have to take into account.
You can't that's like letting a concussed player say, I'm good for next week. You can't allow the player to do it. They're running off emotion.
By the way, I actually would agree with you, but the thing is that there's been a game already played where he hasn't been, he won't be involved in, essentially. So it gives him enough time to be ready in time for the quarterfinal. If hypothetically there wasn't a game and it's just like, okay, you know what, we're going straight into the quarterfinal, then I actually would agree with you that there's a lot of, there's a lot of.
Do you think it's too soon though? Like theoretically, forget it's Antoine Dupont. If a player ends up with the injury that he has, do you think that coming back only less than 2 weeks or about 2 weeks later, or even 3 weeks to that regard is too soon?
But by the way, I actually think it's fine, because the thing it's one of those where if that player, it doesn't have to, like you said, it doesn't have to be Dupont. I actually would say this for any player, by the way, like where if he doesn't play that one game they have supposedly next week, and then you train him up and see if he looks match fit. Because again, it comes down towards the training as well, by the way, guys. You're not going to just say he's straight in, because you have to kind of test him out first in the training and see if he can be physically, is he able to kind of do physical contact, if that makes sense. If he's able to do that with ease, then that's when you can make the decision and be like, you know what, looking at the benefits and pros of it, pros and cons of it, that's where you can say, you know what, he's shown us he can do this in terms of his physical side and training. We're going to put him in this game because he's needed, and he'll add a spark to the game, whichever player it is.
But you just said it there. He's needed. That is why they are considering.
Well, it's any player, but it's any player. I think that's the thing. Like if you're rushing a player from injury, it's like it's going to be tricky. It's like you could say this for Andre Pollard. You could have said this for a lot of other players who come back into the team. Like if it's Retallick who came back in, or sorry, not Retallick, Rizal, because there was a big one they needed in number 6. Or there's a lot of, I guess, like examples you can give. But I understand what you're saying in terms of, it's France's World Cup. He's their main player. You're risking a lot in this sense in terms of, I guess his future in terms of the sports, and he's a big part of that in terms of how the game can grow. So if this was to do something, I don't know, I guess physically, just mentally, but also physically, and for the future, then yes, I do really understand. This could be, there could be long-term, I guess, damage in that sense, and that's you never really want that.
It's one of those scenarios. It's all well and good if it goes well, but if something does go seriously wrong, I'm just not sure who's going to get the blame, because theoretically, that kind of falls back onto World Rugby, because they would have to be like, look, he's only just, he broke his face. He needs to. Who would you say is more rest and recovery?
Would it be World Rugby or the French?
I think that it's probably a little bit of both, to be honest, because France are always going to say, oh, he looked good in training. And even if Dupont's like lying there holding his face, they'll be like, get up, mate. You're all right, aren't you? And he'll be sitting there
Yeah.
going, no, but I guess I have to be because we've got this quarter final just around the corner that we've got to play him. But I'm just worried that because he's only allowed, there were like all the regulations and whatnot, he's not allowed a very thick mask to be able to hold it together. Yes. And because that's the thing, other player safety comes into it if the mask is any more solid, because then it's like hitting into a very solid option or a very solid object. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be some great photos, I'm sure, if Dupont does manage to get himself through the match. But then it's also going to be pretty terrifying scenes if he's lying down on the ground looking like he's completely out to it, because he's like, it doesn't even have to be head contact though. It's just the body getting shaken around if he gets hit in the body. I think I'm not so much concerned as well, I should mention, for like the French hopes in their next game if Dupont's playing or not. I'm more concerned for the player himself. Yeah, definitely because of all the yellow cards and red cards we've seen for head contact throughout this Rugby World Cup. The likeliness of him getting a shot there is pretty high.
Against the box as well.
Even if he's like lying down in a breakdown, you know? What's going to stop Evan Etzebeth from going, league drop? No, no, he wouldn't do that.
And this is where I agree with you in the sense like where you also have to remember who they're facing as well. And the Bucks are, I mean, they're known as a very physical team as well. So like for them, like that's where I can see the reason behind your thing, because it gives more, it becomes more likely. If that's what I'm trying to say. Like, I'm not saying it's going to happen. This is all hypothetical of what we're saying here. But yes, the chances of it happening are, I guess, go up a bit. But going back towards that, just the bulk game in that sense, and I guess the Springboks itself. I mean, we're going to probably answer this question most likely the next two, and we're going to still kind of go back and forth in this. But going off this game now, we've seen Hunter Paul, of course, now start, and I think he came off roughly around like the 50th mark, 60th mark, somewhere around there. And, you know, Libok came once on, and like you said, did pretty well getting off the bench. But what do you think now? Like, what happens in terms of this quarterfinal? Like, do you think the Bucks know already what they're going to do, or in terms of starting places, or what do you think?
Well, that one is a tricky question because Pollard, of course, getting those kicks over early and also doing very nicely as a playmaker at number 10, making all the tackles that he needed to. He didn't really do anything wrong in this game up against Tonga. Mani Libok off the bench, we saw him add a little bit more attacking prowess into the Springbok side, but yeah, it's a big decision. I feel like they'd probably opt to go with that experience of Pollard in the future games throughout the quarterfinals because I think they'll still want to be able to put together every 3 points that's available. And that's not saying that Mani Libok wouldn't be able to get those points over if he was also taking the kicks. It almost seemed like he needed to just get that opportunity off the bench to line up those boots, because that first kick that he took was actually very tricky for Mani Libok.
Yeah.
And he smashed it out the park. So, yeah, I'd say they'll opt for Pollard, but Libok still, for me, has to be somewhere in the Springboks 23.
Yeah, see, that's what I agree with. I actually completely agree with you there. Where I think you still have to be a part of it somehow. And like I said beforehand, maybe you do go with someone like Grant Williams and Libok as maybe the 6-2 split, because they give you different options in terms of that, you know, scrum half, you know, slash winger, as I said it is. And then with Mani Libok, you can play 10 or 15 if needed. So it gives you a lot of depth in that sense. So that's interesting. But again, like, the more I think about it now, I mean, maybe this is maybe a one-way traffic in this question, but who would you say is the better playmaker? Because I think that's where you can make a bit more. I think it's a bit more. Maybe it's just Pollard straight up, but I also do think Libok's improved so much in terms of his playmaking ability in the last year or so that I don't know. It's kind of gone into my head a bit where I'm thinking, no, maybe Libok could be a better. Maybe he is a better playmaker than Pollard, but again, that could just be me seeing Libok obviously play a lot more recently compared to the likes of Pollard. So, what do you think on that front?
Although ever since Libok has been at that number 10 jersey for the Springboks, I think I saw a stat that was throughout 2022-2023, the Springboks on average scoring the most tries throughout their fixtures, which is completely different to what we saw maybe 1 or 2 years ago for the Boks when they were only getting maybe 1 or 2 tries. So Pollard, he almost has to try and adapt to this new Springbok style, which I feel like he didn't do too badly throughout that South African game. Although while he was on the field, I believe they only did score those 4 tries compared to maybe a couple more that they could have had if Libok was starting. But it's whether or not those kicks would have gone over is the part that I think a lot of people are still weighing their mind on. But yeah, It's an interesting one. The Springboks, I feel like it's a blessing and a curse to have Andre Pollard back in. It's a blessing because he's a brilliant player, but it's also that little bit of a curse because now what do you do with your starting lineup?
Exactly.
Where does that leave Mani Lebok? I don't think they can afford to completely take him out. Definitely not with what he's been able to do over the last 12 or so months with his attacking. And I feel like that late in a game could actually win you a contest. But then saying that, Andre Pollard's kicking could also, yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? I could go back and forth for like an hour going between the two options and still wouldn't quite have the right result.
No, we're going to keep talking about this, by the way, guys. Most likely for every single episode.
We still won't give you the answer.
Exactly, we're not going to be able to give you the answer in terms of what we think, but yeah, it's going to be tricky. But again, like I do want to touch on and just say that with with really like the last aspect of this kind of whole game, that throughout this game we also saw the likes of Mpimpi come up, kind of leave early. And that, I believe, he fractured his cheekbone, is what I'm seeing in reports in terms of the injury. Maybe it's similar to Dupont's.
How many weeks do you think he'll be out for, Tim?
Well, he's out for the whole competition. He's literally out.
That's a bit weird, isn't it? That
I know,
isn't
that
out
weird?
For the whole competition.
But
Can he not get a face mask and just play a little bit?
You know, there's a reason why I'm pushing. I mean, there's a whole video, by the way. I'm not sure if you've seen this, but there's literally a video of Dupont's injury and then Mpimpi's one. It's good because it actually shows you that one first and then not both at the same time. And there's a huge difference actually in terms of both of them. But
one of them looked a lot worse, didn't it?
Oh, you said Dupont's one?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I thought the Mpimpi one, like, it just shows that if you get hit right in the right spot, like, it can do the damage because, like, the contact for it was only a penalty because it looked like he only kind of brushed him a little bit, but it must have just been the angle that he hit him on, something to do with that just caused it to happen. And
it's crazy because there wasn't a card at all. But of course, for Dupont's one, it was literally just a yellow then turned into a red.
Yeah, so they haven't given out any actual red cards yet, have they? It's always been the upgraded ones that we've had throughout it. It meets a yellow card, fresh shoulder, so we'll do the X. That's the thing that we've been taught throughout this World Cup, isn't it?
Has there not been a straight red? I thought there were...
I think there was one earlier on for 2 yellows, or was that...
Yeah.
That might have been just before the Rugby World Cup that we saw the red come out. For Scott Barrett, I think it was, but...
I was gonna say, but again, but the thing, obviously, World Cup, you're trying to make it so there's not a lot of controversy around the TMO and I guess like the card system, which is it's needed. You never want that to be the center of focus, and really, we've never really had that. I mean, like within any of the games, really, which is a good thing, by the way. I mean, I can think back. I'd say maybe the England-Argentina game, because again, that's what that was a decision in terms of that red card to Curry that could have changed the game, but of course it went into England did win it, so it wasn't as controversial as it would have been. But we'll see what happens, of course, when it goes into the knockout stages, because that's where it could be blown out of kind of proportion in terms of I guess the decisions made and what the public thinks about it. But again, really with that Mpimpi injury now, this is kind of the last question I want to get into. Who do you think now replaces him? Because knowing the Bucs are obviously going to go for a replacement for him, as he is now officially out of the whole tournament. So they're going to have to replace him with someone. And you do have the likes of Dosa Tueva. You have the likes of Gerhard Stinkap. You have who else? You have Herschel Yankees. You got Evan Roos. You got there's
John
I can't think of other names.
Also.
But of course, the main one, and I think what a lot of people are saying is going to happen is Lukhanyo. That's the one that a lot of people are thinking about. But it's interesting because, as a Bok fan, I was like, we're not going to see Andre Pollard or Lukhanyo in this tournament, but we might actually see both of them, which is going to be very exciting to see. But what's your take? Because again, in my opinion, I actually think it's not as easy of a decision. But for the Bucs, I think they've already said in the press conference, we already know who we're picking. So I'm like, oh, okay, maybe it is very easy. So what's your take on this?
Well, it will depend a little bit on if Lukhanyo is match fit, first of all. But because I think that would be the one that if he is available, they would stick into the squad. There's also the argument at the moment of do they have a third hooker? I know that they've got Marco van Staden, but his line-out throwing seems to be something that could hurt them in those big important games, so they may look to bring him back as a 6 and then have maybe Joseph Weber come in as a hooker, although his line-out's any better than apart from hooker Marco van Staden.
Exactly.
It's the tricky thing for the box. But I honestly feel like if it was up to me, which it's not, of course, I like someone like a Jean-Luc Dupré. I feel like the fact that he offers you that 6 option, Ivan Ruiz, I feel like will just cause more problems in terms of that number 8 jersey. Like not in a bad way, just in terms of the selection troubles that they will have because they'll have 3 players that they've got to try and squeeze in. But yeah, I'll probably go Jean-Luc Dupré, give him a crack, seeing as he didn't get a huge amount of time throughout the Rugby Championship. He played very well in that game for the Barbarians up against the Samoans before the Rugby World Cup. So yeah, I'll give Dupré a crack just for fun.
Yeah, so moving on then from that game, again, that was the last game we covered in terms of this review. We have to finish it off, of course, with our play of the round, team of the round, and the player we didn't expect to do well, but was awesome. So we're going to go through all 3 of them. And yeah, we're going to first off with you. So in terms of your player of the round, who was it for you?
My player of the round was Lamani Lamiki for the Japanese.
Oh, okay. I like it.
Decided to go with him. Brilliant performance at fullback. One of the main reasons I believe that the Japanese were able to get themselves that victory, over 100 running meters, beating defenders for fun, and looking like a very solid option at the back for the Japanese. So that's who I'll go with player of the round. What about yourself? Who have you gone with?
I've gone with a kind of an obvious one here, but I just think you've got to put him up. You got to say him after he scored 4 tries. And it is Darcy Graham. I just think he was impressive overall for the Scottish. So yeah, he's my player of the round, and I think it's deserved. So yeah, in terms of the team of the round, I'll go first with this one. I've gone, I guess, with an obvious one once again. I've gone with the All Blacks. I think they were just incredible against the Italians. I don't think anyone expected that big of a scoreline. So you got to give them credit in that sense. So yeah, the All Blacks are my team of the round. So what about yourself?
Well, I've actually gone with, once again, an unorthodox one. I knew that you would go probably with the All Blacks after the way that they played. I have actually gone with Tonga in this round.
Interesting.
Now, I know that a lot of people would be like, but they lost by 31 points. And I'd say yes, but they were supposed to lose by a whole lot more than the 31. Yeah, and scoring the 3 tries, the most that anyone's been able to score up against the Springboks.
That's impressive.
Throughout this Rugby World Cup. Like the Springboks, don't get me wrong, could have easily gone with them, but I feel like we know they can do better than they did in that game. We know that the ceiling could have been raised a little bit more. So that is why I've gone with Tonga, just because they actually, I think it would have heavily benefited the Springboks the way that Tonga played in that game, rather than just being the easy beat. So yeah, gone with Tonga as my team of the round.
I like that.
I don't think I've gone with a winner in team of the round as of yet, have I? I think I've always backed someone who's lost but have played well in losing. I think it's been the trend for a majority of these leagues.
I think you've only done it once, actually. I think there was one time where you chose a team you won, but I think I can't remember it, but I know there's one time because I have a funny feeling you did. But I
feel like I'm the equivalent of like hosting a sporting event and everyone gets a ribbon.
Exactly.
Just
you're like the Oprah of rugby. You get a car, whatever you want. But
Jesus, I don't think I can hand out cars as of yet.
Oh, you never know. But you can hand out rugby balls. Let's just say that. That's maybe that's the award.
I've got a lot of balls. Yeah. I bought 10 after the rugby league.
Moving on then. But we're going to go on to the last one. Moving on then towards the last, award in terms of the player who just was surprised us the most. Who was your player?
The thing is, he didn't really surprise me because I knew he was a good player, but I've gone with Dion Fourie as my or not as my number 2, but my guy who stepped up the way that I guess some people wouldn't have expected him to, mainly because of that 100% line-out accuracy. I don't think people were anticipating him to be so accurate at line-out time. Like, I was thinking maybe like 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, something like that in terms of accuracy, but nah, every single line-out throw he did was 100% on the money, also getting turnovers in the breakdowns, making tackles, scoring a try. Dion Fourie, he easily could have been my man of the round as well, but I decided to go with Lamani Lamiki in that regard. I guess you could swap those 2 around.
I was going to say, you could actually swap them around if you wanted to, because he was also awesome, and they were both awesome, so I understand that. So yeah, I guess in terms of my, surprising player, or the player who was awesome throughout the round, who we didn't expect, follows suits in year one. Again, in terms of the team of the round who you picked was Tonga. I've gone with a Tongan player myself, and he's probably the one who I think just out of all the players who, because a lot of them actually stood out in all honesty, but he was just the one I just thought was awesome throughout the one. And it was Ben Tamafuna. I just thought he was the one who really just every single time he got the ball, he would just launch himself at it and just kind of create a whole gap into the defense. And obviously that would kind of allow Tonga to kind of break the lines a lot of the time. And yeah, he was awesome. He was just really cool to watch. And again, he had a really good send off as well. Like I said beforehand, all the South African fans kind of got on their feet and just applauded him as he came off the bench, or came off the field, I mean. So he was kind of cool. I'm kind of happy I've got to see him live, because I've got to appreciate what it feels like to watch him, because he's a force to be reckoned with. So I thought it was cool. But anyway, we're going to leave it there, guys. Again, it's been a pretty long podcast, one of the longest ones we've actually done in terms of our reviews. That's for sure. But again, hope you guys obviously enjoyed this one. Make sure to like the video, guys. Subscribe to our channel and check out our respective channels. But besides that, yeah, we'll see you guys next time.